I really need to get another mouse. I mean, these wireless ones are supposed to be good, but
They don't last.
Chris, the batteries.
They don't last.
Maybe I need to pray for the Jesus to fix the mouse. That petition work that we frown upon.
No.
If I offer him some spring water, do you think he'd do the job of fixing my mouse for me?
No, but he might turn it into wine for you.
Not really a fan of wine, if I'm honest with you.
We do a lot of fucking whining.
Right. Today's topic of conversation is Christian witchcraft. Okay.
Okay.
Now, Christianity is this thing that's becoming rather trendy. The real gods are on. Right. This trendy religion, Chris, all the young whippersnappers of the past 1,000 or so years have really taken to it. And there's a lot of this mixing now, I think, of people that want to embrace multiple cultures, multiple crafts, multiple magical practices, religious practices, all that sort of thing. What I believe you call eclectic, is that right? Eclectic.
Eclectic.
Eclectic, yeah. Yes? Eclectic.
Yes. Eclectic.
What does eclectic mean to you? If someone says the word, what comes to mind?
Eclectic means a bit of everything to me.
Now, is that a jack of all trades, master of none? Or
no, that means ADHD can't focus on one thing for long enough.
Right. Okay. So that is a case of got to catch them all. Pokemon.
Yeah. It's like I'm doing this now. Oh, something shiny. Go and follow the shiny thing. Oh, another thing shiny. Follow that thing over there.
Now, when you mix a match, like when you go to those, those horrible harvester restaurants where you get the salad bowl and it's like a gone off kind of limp lettuce with croutons and such. Mm-hmm. There's things that go together and there's things that just don't go together. And some would say that Christianity is in the religion and witchcraft is in the craft of the practice of witchcraft and such, don't go together. What are your thoughts on the statement that witchcraft and Christianity don't go together and you cannot do both of those?
It's one of those things, because witchcraft is a craft, first and foremost. I want to be able to argue that anything can mix with it because it's a craft. So you take what you know and you build on it and you develop a practice that is authentically you. However, in the way in which the kind of Abrahamic religions, and I don't mean just Christianity, I mean Abrahamic religions, they don't tend to mix well with witchcraft, or what I would consider to be witchcraft. They mix quite well with ceremonial magics, which I find to be magician work. So there's that kind of like, I could understand a magician keeping their Christian roots alive through their practice, because a lot of ceremonial magicians kind of work with that kind of part of the spectrum anyway, those sorts of deities they're calling on. The bit that gets tricky for me is the kind of the PKTWs, the kind of pre-Keldons, RKWs,
the post-Kelden traditional witches, and then the
pre-Kelden lot. Right. Is I can kind of focus on the kind of cunning man's practice of using folk saints, but they don't tend to be using the Jesus. So I'm kind of stuck with what part of the pantheon. Now I'm going to take that one out of context now. That one of the pantheon of Christianity, as in the other things beyond the Trinity. So the folk saints, etc., the apostles, all of that to me still makes up a pantheon. It's a group of higher level spirits in theory. So there is a pantheon to play with. So I'm not gonna play the polytheists are the only ones that can be witches, because I don't think that's fair. But there is that kind of, you would have to, I feel, as a witch practicing Christian magic, be exploring the entire spectrum of the Yahwehs, and all the different individuals that come with it, if you were to call it Christian witchcraft. I think if you are still going to church and then playing with wands and athames when you get home, you are not a Christian witch. It feels like another one of these oxymoron kind of terms that people like to put polarities together in order to create something new and trendy. Because I feel like Christian witchcraft is one of those trendy things, like traditional witchcraft was 10 years ago. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like it's a bit of one of those, like chaos witches, which is what a lot of the eclectics try and call themselves, chaos witches. And you kind of like, no, chaos magic is a very specific path, and what you're describing is not chaos magic.
More of a philosophy, I'd say, because there's now a structure
modality.
Chaos magic, but I think to start with, it was very much a philosophy, and a great philosophy for people from more of like a secular background. Because it's a case of throw yourself into trying that, like one of those taster buffets of all you can eat. You know, you try a bunch of food. You go to the little Japanese bar, it ain't going to be proper Japanese food, but it's going to be somewhat imitation Japanese food. You go to Little Italy, get some Italian, you get some pizza or something like that, maybe some lasagna. It's not going to be great, but it's going to give you some rough idea of what it's kind of all about in it.
Yeah.
Right, so I think the first thing that needs to be done is to define witchcraft from our own perspectives. Right, so from my perspective, witchcraft, you have to meet one or more of the three following things, right? Given that witchcraft and the word and that you look at it, look at the older reasons for using that word, who was being accused of witches, what witchcraft was. Evil, baneful, maleficent magic, black magic is what they call it now. If you practice that, people would call you a witch. Okay. Oh, that person practices bad magic, black magic, evil magic. There are fucking people up using magic. Witch. Okay. So that's the first. If you practice that, I think in Europe, I think that it's fair to say you would be classed as a witch, right? So baneful magic. The second thing is legal. If I go and kill someone, and then I get caught doing it, and then I get sent to prison, I'm declared a murderer, right? Because I've gone through a court of law and I've been found guilty of murder, therefore I'm a murderer, right? Legally speaking. If I didn't kill the person, but I was framed, but I still went through the legal process and was found guilty of murdering, I wouldn't be a murderer, but I would be a murderer. That's how I see it, right? So legally speaking, and from documentary record keeping, I'm a murderer because I've been found guilty in a court of law. Witchcraft, to me, often feels like that also. If you have a legal system and that legal system finds you guilty of something, that is the official label of you, whether you are or not. If you're a healer and someone wants to drum up better business for themselves by knocking out the competition and accusing the little old lady wise woman healer of being a witch and saying, oh, ship her off, she's a baddie, look, she hasn't aged a day, she still looks 80 and she's 109, right? If that's the case, then they might, take her to court, whatever, find her guilty of practicing witchcraft. She might not be guilty of practicing witchcraft. Maybe she's only ever healed people, right? Maybe she doesn't do anything bad. Maybe she's a good Christian that uses the herbs from the local physic garden or something like that, right? But she's still found guilty technically in a court of law. Therefore, for me, legally speaking, she would be classed as a witch. She's found guilty of that. So I'd class her. I'd put that in the category, the scapegoat category, we'll call it, right? Falsely accused, potentially, or actually accused and legitimately bad. The third one, and by the way, the first two, I think we would be guilty of. So I don't think there's anyone that would say that neither of those are realistically, we couldn't get a way of getting out of saying, we do baneful magic. So witchcraft, ka-ching, that one we mix, that one we do. The legal thing, I don't think I've ever been taken to court recently for practicing witchcraft. However, if I look at all of the things that people were getting accused of and being found guilty of, there's a lot of those things that I do and have done. Therefore, that would also, if I was to wind up in court, I probably would be accused of it. If this was a couple, not even centuries ago, technically, then I'd probably be found guilty of it, let's be fair. So that's ka-ching for that one. The third one is the religious aspect of it. Now, what I'm seeing a lot of witchcraft. It's this old ancient cult, these old ancient magical practices that come from the Celtic paganism and such. And they all died out, but we're trying to piece them back together. It's a great mystery cult, and we are witches in a mystery cult together, albeit one that we only started in the 1950s. That I would say, yeah, that is one of the three types of witchcraft. If you're in some sort of coven or group or initiate of some sort of tradition, for example, that I'd say, yeah, witch, because that is what they're trying to do. It's what they're referring to themselves of, and they're to a certain extent incorporating a lot of witchcraft in their magical practice. And legally speaking, it's religion now, isn't it? Wicca and such like that has some legal standing. Paganism is getting more and more legal standing throughout the world, particularly in the UK at the moment. However, one needs to think about the individual. So one needs to think about what the broad community would class as witchcraft nowadays, and then what history would class as witchcraft, and then what the individual people would class as witchcraft. Now, there are people that are Christians, that they believe in Christ, they try to follow the path of Jesus and all that kind of thing, but they practice folk magic. So they practice some sort of magic, maybe cunning folk arts, that kind of thing. And many Christians would point at them and say, you're a witch. So in their community of Christianity, Church of England or something like that, they would poke at you saying, you're using a voodoo doll or a puppet or some kind of plaster image, a fetish of someone to do healing magic or something else. That is witchcraft. Your community, that is the various churches that make up your little branch of Christianity on the Christian tree, will all look at you and say, witch, witch, witch. So I think it's fair to say that that person probably is a witch. There's enough people that's accusing them of it. There's enough historical precedent to say, well, maybe they probably are to a certain extent. So from this idea of, can a Christian be a witch, witchcraft being something that you do, the oldest ideas of it being baneful, maleficent magic, even baneful, maleficent magic, that's something that essentially causes harm, which, as we know, a new job spell can cause harm for someone, because it can stop someone that was going to get a job getting a job and instead give it to you. So I think there can be Christian witches. But what I am saying is Christians that want to move outside of a dogmatic religion, but that are too scared to, dabbling more and more and more and more in other areas of magic, in other religions, other magical systems and such, but wanting the comfort of being able to still refer to themselves as a Christian, to still think, I might be dabbling in that. I've started learning traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and that. I'm still a Christian, mind, but I'm starting to learn it because it's interesting to me. And, you know, I'm only doing a bit of the herbs and stuff. Okay, I've done a little ritual because someone told me to. Starting to go further and further and further, that you kind of have to ask yourself at that point, if your church pastor's saying you're not a Christian anymore, you're doing all sorts of bad magic, you yourself are only using it as I kind of like the feeling that I'm still part of this, so I still get into heaven kind of thing. That, I think, is a little bit more of a blurry line for me. What about you, though? What do you think?
Well, I feel like you're calling crystals a gateway drug to witchcraft.
Well, that's what a lot of Christians would say. Crystal therapy, essential oils, all that sort of thing. There's memes and all that sort of stuff that say it is a gateway to witchcraft, gateway drug to witchcraft, as they could say. And many Christians, when they say that, I believe are right in saying that, because I know people that have, first they get the tarot cards. No, sorry, first they get the oracle cards with the angels on, and then they go a little bit further, and then they go a little bit further, and then before they know it, they're kind of like, well, I kind of am a Christian, but at the same time, I don't really practice, don't go to church, don't do this, don't do that. It's kind of like, so are you culturally Christian then? This idea of being culturally Christian is an interesting one. It goes back to labels, Chris. I'm not a fan of labels without purpose.
Well, let's face it, neither of us would have traditionally called ourselves witches, because that word is
we'd have been accused of it. Though. We still do.
So, but my point is more the fact that it's a label that we accept because it tells the right kind of story. Which, let's face it, that's what labels are there for. That are the fact that they're common language that allows you to explain yourself to a new person. And I know we've talked about how much I hate the word pagan, so we're not going back there. But the witch is a word I'm fairly comfortable with. It's just one that I've had to get used to.
Well, you are an outsider and an outcast.
During this life, just had to get used to it. But yeah, Christian witchcraft fascinates me. In a sense of kind of witchcraft within that paradigm is problematic in the same way that I find spiritualist groups problematic, like that kind of halfway house between, well, I don't want to accept there are other things out there because Christianity says no, but at the same time I found a loophole in the Holy Ghost in order to kind of say that's where I'm getting my messages from. Like that kind of, I'm just accessing one part of the Trinity in order to further my knowledge and my access. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, along with like talking tongues, there are certain churches where talking in tongues would be a definite sign of the devil, whereas in other churches it's a case of that is a accepted way of communing with the Holy Spirit. So you kind of like, do you know what I mean? Like there's that blurry line that I find problematic when I look at it from a magical point of view, when I look at it psychically and go, but that's not what you're doing, right? Like communing with the Holy Spirit is one thing. What you're doing there is not quite that. So there's that kind of, the same way going and watching a Catholic service couldn't be more witchcraft if you tried. Like it's at that point if you're looking at it and going, you do realize what you're doing there, right? That is there is no such thing as the quite like representational magic than Holy Communion. Like, you are imbibing the body and blood of your deity in their earthly form. Your deity in their earthly form. Sorry, I best clarify that. I'm going to consume him in order. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just,
For eternal life. I'm going to drink the blood of a deity to attain eternal
you
life.
know, there's something about that kind of goes, wait a fucking minute, like.
And we thought Lord Voldemort was bad for stealing the unicorn blood. I mean, that's even worse.
But yeah, you're literally consuming, and in that sense, it is really and truly consuming, isn't it? In that transmutation of taking in the body and blood of Christ, slowly consuming him over time. At what point did we run out of Jesus to eat?
Well, I mean, in either one that did that thing with the miracle with the bread and all of that, where he fed the 5,000, he just kept pulling it out of a hat like a stage magician. I mean, blood eternal. Who knows? I do like the idea of a down below, you know, the secret vaults in the Vatican Library and Archive and such. Underneath that, there's just a bunch of Christ's descendants that they pretend don't exist. That are just strung up and bleeding, and they just like have a production line. And every generation or two, they do the whole kind of breeding thing, like they do with farmers do with sheep, where they make them interbreed. After a few generations, the blood congeals right around the time when the webbed toes start to grow and such.
Stood them out.
I like the idea of that. It's quite sick and creepy, but it amuses me. We have a couple of questions, actually. This was an interesting one. I'll get your opinion, and then I'll say something that I've got to try and work through how to say it without sounding politically incorrect. But Jason says, I wonder how many modern Christian witches are attempting to emulate a voodoo-like syncretic religion without being accused of appropriation. Very American, I would say. What's your answer to that?
I think it's fair. I do think that the kind of voodoo hoodoo is a very different process of this. Like, there is a quite obvious lineage to kind of African traditional magic. So kind of bringing that across and using that there, you know, the Black Madonna has been a thing for a very long time. Let's face it. So bearing in mind they were in the Middle East, they wouldn't have been white. So, you know, quite quickly you can kind of go, okay, I can see that tradition there. There are, you know, mixes there with kind of what they would call Black Madonna and the kind of Isis and Horus story. You've got so many things there to kind of play with why those two religions quite nicely kind of synchronize in order to become a process, and then kind of carrying that across and kind of seeing the kind of you know, hoodoo, voodoo, southern conjure, all of those processes seem quite obvious, and also that kind of hiding in plain sight that we all talk about, that is where that word appropriation always comes in, is that kind of force to behave that way. And you're kind of like, well, not really. I think there's a very natural progression to how hoodoo and voodoo became what they are in the south of the US. Like, there is quite a clear lineage there, and that's not all oppression. You know, I will stand there and say that so you don't have to, Liam, accidentally, you know, say something you shouldn't.
I will, don't worry, there'll be plenty of that.
So there is that part. I'm totally with Jason on the whole Christian witches have found a perfect loophole there of trying to find this escapee of not being PC and being able to be safe in that kind of wokeness that is Christian witchcraft. However, if the Christian witches suddenly start practicing hoodoo, I will be calling that out, because that is not cool.
Well, they'll start calling it Christian hoodoo, won't they, or something like that? Do you want to join our Christian hoodoo coven? It's like, I don't know how much of that was bullshit.
Because ultimately, those three kind of traditions, hoodoo, voodoo, and conjure, are all closed practices. So, and they're actually, there's a mixture of them being, some of them coming from, and conjure, I'm pretty convinced that is slightly more Moorish. But that's my own opinion on that.
Closed practices, Chris? What, you mean that I can't buy it from Lucky Mojo?
You can buy it from Lucky Mojo, but someone's not going to tell you.
Can I become a proper practitioner? Because I can buy a course from Lucky Mojo. That's surely not closed practice, no, if they're selling it.
You can be in the same way that they'll let you join most covens, and how they have the public face, shall we say, public face,
the outer circle.
The Opus Dei or someone like that might be, yes, you can join up, but whether or not you'll actually be able to be allowed to study the actual practice is a different matter. I think where people can get confused when they watch us talking about these practices is that we don't go there when we're not saying that we could learn it because it's a closed practice. What we're saying is, when you look and deconstruct someone's practice, so looking at it in its entirety, not just the ingredients that are in front of you, but that kind of astral magical footprint, is why we talk about being able to reconstruct someone else's magic. We may not use the same words or whatever, but the actual practice itself could be reconstructed if you were to look at it on a magical level of someone that's actually practicing the authentic it, rather than what Hoodoo Delish is talking about, or who's that other one that does the conjure that you like, the drag queenie one.
I don't know. I'm not allowed to say what I call her because I don't know what her name is and it's not politically correct.
I was hoping you might remember the name. But go on, your turn, Liam. And stay woke.
I'm not woke, so I cannot stay woke if I was not woke to begin with, you'd say. I will try my best to use words which won't offend people, not because I want to offend. I'm not trying to offend people, but I find that in this day and age, I don't know what vocabulary you're supposed to use and such. I honestly really don't. It
changes too often.
I find it too complicated now to keep up. So I'm going to try not to offend anyone. I don't mean to offend anyone unless I actually purposefully try to offend you. And I will tell you if I'm trying to offend any group or specific individuals out there, as I always do. So I wonder how many Christian witches are attempting to emulate voodoo-like syncretic religion without being accused of appropriation. So there's a couple of things there. One, I think predominantly Christian witchcraft and people that label themselves as Christian witches. I think predominantly, if you look at them, their practice, they are Christians that are too scared to give up Christianity. I think they are looking outside of Christianity now. They're trying to grow, but they're trying to grow outside of the scope of the religion that at least they've been taught or that they're currently a part of. Now, am I saying that there is no scope for Christianity to grow? I'm not saying that, but I think that if they are calling themselves Christian witches, I'm thinking they've reached a limit to their magical growth. Okay, because many people will say that Christianity is all about raising slaves, right, for Yahweh and such like that. So I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree with that, but that's what people will say. So Christian witches, to me, when someone was to say that, I would think, you're a Christian, you identify as a Christian, that's probably your comfort zone, what you've explored thus far, and you're now looking to look outside of that, but are too scared. Like a kitten for the first time wanting to explore outside. It kind of goes out the door and then goes back in, and they might put a paw out and then it might go back in. Whereas some kittens, like one of yours, would just jump right out and that's it. Christian witches, possibly scared little kittens. I don't mean to say that in a rude way. In regards to emulating voodoo and all that kind of thing, there's a difficult one. So voodoo is in the religion. I'm thinking that that's been made quite quirky and interesting, and is cottoned on because of films and television and books and stuff like that. And when magical practitioners or would-be magical practitioners want to expand their knowledge, they always think the grass is greener on the other side, which means I've learned some stuff from this. What can I steal from other practices, other people's practices, religions, whatever? Let me just, like a rake, just claw at everything and pull everything in and try my best to understand it. A lot of these people will try to do it in a respectful way. Respectfully, normally that means approaching people and trying to learn directly from a voodoo practitioner, for example. Other people would just try and steal the knowledge and such like that, or buy books and things like that. What's right, what's not right, I don't care personally.
A lot of that tends to come from this idea that we were talking about last week with the Celtic paganism thing, was talking about the whole looking for something older. So instead of going to someone that is a hoodoo, voodoo, conjure practitioner, they were trying to go to someone that is from is it an ATR? I can never remember the African traditional religion. ATR, yeah, ATRs. So the rather than going back, because that would be, harder, but they would try and get there in the hopes that they get a more authentic, because they think the older it is, therefore the more magical it is, which is not strictly true. But as some of these themes are coming back up in the questions, I'll jump through the questions. So I'm going to jump to that one first, because Michelle says she was showering, so everybody knows Michelle was having a shower. Do with that wish you wish. It might have missed it, but did I already explain that Christianity lends itself to ceremonial magic more than witchcraft? Yes, Michelle, we said that right at the beginning, so replay it if you want later. I like this comment from Jason. Apparently I'm doing a really good job. I'm adding really in there because he really meant really.
He's not. He's saying you're doing a good job, not a really good job. If he
really
meant a really good job, he'd have added that.
Really good job of describing Christian denominations as flavors of indoctrination. I will never not say that, unfortunately. The only safe one of those Yahweh-based religions is the Judaism. So if you want authentic, you're going to have to go back there.
Is that modern Judaism or ancient Judaism that's died out?
I mean the traditional stuff that you still have to learn the Hebrew for.
There's quite a lot of that still about.
So what was that one? So Will is saying, I'm still trying to figure out the difference between Christians that come with angels and the Christians who don't. I'm not sure the difference myself. I think angels, I think they discover the angels as they start the path towards witchcraft, don't they?
He might be thinking about attachment. He might be thinking about there may be an angel on a practitioner's shoulder or on a person's shoulder, as opposed to just like, I've met lots of people that they say, well, I'm a Christian. It's like, have you ever attended church? Oh, I did when I was younger. It's like, okay, do you believe? Well, I'm a Christian. It's like, well, do you pray? Do you believe? Do you have a personal relationship with God? All that sort of stuff. It's like, well, no, but I'm a Christian because I'm English. It's like, right, okay. Cultural Christian, I see what you mean there. Yeah. They don't come with angels. I'm presuming that's what he meant by coming with angels, is his attachment of angel energy.
Well, sometimes coming with angels is what happens after I tie them up.
That kind of coming with angels. I didn't think he was going there.
Oh. Well, sometimes they need reminding, like prison bitches. Who's in charge?
I don't know if angels can arrive. I thought they were all castrated to enhance Jesus' choir.
Oh, okay.
So they're all singing la 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 la.
It
Castrated.
depends which ones you are referring to. I
Having
think
said that,
technically,
even if someone is castrated, apparently certain fluids don't come out, but other ones do. There is a fluid-like substance that does come out, apparently. Yeah, we learned that at school.
Okay, we're moving on. Michelle says, my Christian psychic friend always refers to God giving her information. It's very passive and inaccurate because God has told her a few times that certain men were perfect for me, but they were definitely not. I added definitely there because I'm adding emphasis where necessary, Liam. Jesus
Perspective.
told me.
Perspective. I have dad and stepmother who receive messages from God. Okay, so they feel that
Do they
God
specify which one?
actually speaks to them, the Jesus, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Although the Holy Spirit doesn't really say a lot. The Holy Spirit's really just the juice that's keeping the certain man in the sky, if you get my drift. It
Wow.
is. At the end of the day, that's what it is. Holy Spirit, what can we lasso and ride? This force that has little. Anyway, we won't go into that because that's a secret. Yes, they talk to angels. Sorry, no, they don't talk to angels. God talks to them and they pray and such, but God tells them to do things, certain things. I can tell you many fucked up stories from my childhood. As Chris will attest to because I've spoken to him about them and such. There was the whole Lake District thing.
Yeah.
So, yes, so they are receiving some kind of information. How much of it is from their mind, dreams and such? How much is it from a spirit? The problem is they don't have any real discernment. They aren't psychic. They haven't grown with that. They cannot distinguish. If they hear a whispering because they're Christian and because it's saying a good thing and it says it's God, they're going to believe that, which is very interesting with a lot of these testimonies. So how people come to God and stuff like that. There's ones where they've had physical manifestations and such, and they say, but Liam, if I was driving down the motorway and I got in a car accident and I flipped the car over but survived and just saw this angel in front of me that was protecting me from oncoming traffic, if you were in that situation, you would believe. I was like, no, I see magical full-fledged manifestations quite a lot. Just because something manifests, that for me, that is not a good enough thing. But for them, that's never happened. That's a thing that they, to a certain extent, think, well, do angels really exist? Oh shit, I actually saw one once. That's kind of a big deal for them. So, what's next?
Well, one, I had to jump on the Jason making comments. It always goes back to Bellamy Angel cards.
It does when Jason's in the comments, yes. Anyone would think that Jason really wants some Bellamy Angel cards.
I'm surprised they don't already exist, is all I'm saying, with people like Jason about, because there's not just Jason, lots of people are like that.
The problem is that all of the images and such that Bellamy produce, we'll go with images, is copyrighted. So we could go and get some Bellamy images, maybe screenshots of videos and such, to produce a deck of Bellamy Oracle Angel cards, but we would get done for that, and not in a good way, in a bad way.
Liam, what I'm thinking is we could take those stills and then do drawings of them from the stills.
Put wings on.
And then put wings on, and then it would be done. And it wouldn't be because they wouldn't be able to prove that they were Bellamy. Put your Holy Trinity away.
I'll stuff it back down in my pants where it belongs.
So there is that possibility. I do think that it would be worth the few days of my time it would take to do this, because I think there's a good market for it out there. Anyway, moving on.
I think that at least if you did do it, Jason would certainly buy some. I think there's a couple of other people that would buy a deck. I might be persuaded to buy a deck, maybe.
The tricky problem would be is we couldn't call it Bellamy, so we'd have to come up with something else.
Bell and me.
Bell and me.
Bell and me. Who's Bell?
Okay, I'll think
Who's
about
Bell?
it.
There are many a bells in that card. There's one.
I might use. To be fair, you can go and do the research for me and get the stills. Okay.
We're doing oracle cards. So can there be? Does there have to be a certain amount of cards? Can I come up with the concept, or is it got to be one for every angel? Do we do a poll or something like that where we say, look, you need to vote for your favorite character, let's say star, who's going to represent. So is Dolph Lambert going to be Gabriel? Because Gabriel's my favorite angel. What about Chris Evans with a K? I'm kind of thinking like a bit of I don't want to say Michael because Michael's a bit of a dickhead, but I don't know. It stereotypically would be more of a Michael kind of Mikhail type.
It's fine, Liam. This is taking up far too much of your thought process. We are live, as they say. Mr. William says perhaps it's contracts. I think he was talking about those with angels and those without. Helen has said you may need a charm bag to conjure up your own Thoth Bellamy models. I think she's going for some attraction magic there.
That could be a very interesting charm/ball bag.
And then I don't trust Jason anymore because Jason's trying to get back there, which is 50 Shades of Michael, an Archangel Oracle deck illustrated by Chris, which I totally could do.
Love that. That would be so brilliant. I tell you what. I
totally could do.
It's just hardcore bondage scene.
So I may have to give some thought to that one. Because I don't know about you, but we were talking about saints earlier today.
Yeah.
Well, one of my favourite ones is it Saint Sebastian, who's got all of
that bloody film is.
No, Saint Sebastian I'm sure is the one that is embedded with all these arrows all the way down his body.
I've seen some scenes like that.
So I'm kind of thinking, actually,
where they together with a piece of string, they'll put them on, and then they'll grab it and go like that, and it pulls them all off. Have you seen that? I've seen that on those videos.
No. Okay, Liam, we're moving on. Okay,
moving on. Blame Jason. It's not my fault.
I'm definitely blaming Jason. And next time that we speak to Jason, I think I'm going to give him a good verbal telling off. Although with the things he's coming out with, I think he might like that. So, Christian Witchcraft, get back there.
Well, we are so bad, such bad Fausty witches that we do not stay on a topic. Christian Witchcraft, as far as I'm concerned, if you are calling yourself a Christian witch, I prejudge that, and I think you are probably Christian, but you're looking outside of what a lot of Christians would consider to be what you're allowed to practice, what you're allowed to do. I think that when it regards to cunning folk practices, pretty much most of the stuff that you find from cunning folk archives and such are given from the perspective of the client. You look at a lot of these old records and a lot of these books, like the Cunningman's Handbook and stuff like that. A lot of it is a client talking about what the cunning man or wise woman did for them, how they did it. It's not really the practitioner saying, this is how you do this. There's lots missing.
Yeah.
Is that Christianity? Well, I think the people that are there, some of them will be Christians, some of them won't be Christians.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
To go with that, Jason made this comment earlier. I missed it because of all the comments about Bellamy. Would you categorize the Christian devil worshipping witches as Christian witches, which is what you're kind of talking about there with the cunning practices. I don't know if they were widespread beyond here into the Americas or not. Or is it very much a European thing?
I wouldn't. If they believed in the Christian devil and were worshipping the Christian devil, I don't believe that they would necessarily be called Christian witches. I think they'd be called Gnostic Christians.
Yes.
People look at that reference. Most people won't. However, in all seriousness, I would say that I'd like to go to Satanists, but Satanism is more of a political movement. Realistically, so I would imagine that they would be, I would call them devil worshippers. A lot of Christians would call them devil worshippers. I'd call them devil worshippers because they worship the Christian devil. So yeah, I would say that, and I've met them, and I think throughout history, like people go on about, oh well, witches never worship the devil, this, that, and the other, and then people talk about, oh well, we have a folk devil, blah 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 blah, spirit of the crossroads, blah 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 blah. Actually, whenever you have people that believe in Jesus or God or anything like that, I've met so many people that have questioned their faith, questioned why bad things happen to them, people they love in their lives, and actually do say and have said, well, I worship God and Jesus, and yet the devil, he just lets the devil do bad things, so why not worship the devil, and he might not do that to me. So they kind of switch their allegiance because they think, well, rather than pray to Jesus, who's allowing this to happen, let's just pray to the person that's doing it, the thing that's doing it. And I think if that is true today, for the indoctrinated, as William Caskins would say, indoctrinated Christians, then I think that's probably would not just have been true for today. I think that going backwards in time, it might not be a huge amount of people, but I think there will be people that will have thrown in the towel in the past and said, look, I'm poor, I'm a pleb, can't read or write, can barely feed my family, I worship, go to church every weekend, nothing happens. I'm just going to worship the devil and see what happens. I think there will have been a handful of people, maybe more, that have done that in times
ultimately gone. It's ultimately what this is called, what this show is named after. That would be what we call a Faustian deal, a deal with the devil. So, it's a nice loop there, definitely. Michelle's come back with, most Christians would never admit to witchcraft because witches take control and Christianity demands passivity.
Christianity demands passivity unless you are in charge of the church. And this is always the danger, because I've had many a conversation with Christians and I've said about, look, there are so many different perspectives within your own church. There are so many different things going on. Why is it that your Jesus doesn't round you all up here before all of you and say, well, those ones over there, Church of Latter Saints, yeah, they've got it right. You get people that claim Jesus came before me and he said, oh yes, become a Mormon, all that sort of shit. What you don't get is you don't get it universal, which means that either Jesus can't or Jesus don't fucking want to. There could be multiple reasons why Jesus can't, and there could be multiple reasons why Jesus doesn't want to. But I mean, the biggest problem with that, which is again the biggest problem I think with religion, is because most people, when they practice their religion, even those that say that their religion teaches to have a one-to-one relationship with God, they don't. What they have is a relationship with a pastor, with a figurehead that is a human. And that's the problem with cults, isn't it? The thing with what people get really just mind fucked over with witchcraft or occultism, it is you are sovereign. You may not be the biggest, baddest thing in the universe, but you are trying to make it on your own. And the things that you find, spirits and people and such, they have to win you over. They have to win your trust, Like as above, so below. How do you make friends in the real world, in real life, IRL?
Oh, he's learned that one now. Bless him.
Well, are you proud? I'm quite proud of myself,
Very
actually.
proud. He remembered that one. Yeah, I think what I find funny is that kind of whole priesthood aspect is just so pagan. Like, there is that kind of part for me that kind of goes, okay, so you chat with a person that is the representation of your deity here. That's interesting. Stood behind that altar of yours.
The Pope, the High Priest,
Yes.
and then you've got the usual priests. Right, very interesting.
But it fascinates me. It does fascinate me.
It is fascinating. But
It's
when you tinker with someone's religion, you're tinkering with their how they cope with life, because a lot of the time for religion is for people is that foundation, is the mortar that holds all the bricks together, that is their mind. So if you remove that mortar, you remove that thing, it completely screws people up, and they'll defend it to the death.
which is crazy, really. I think what fascinates me most is how on earth it's managed to last this long. Because you look at how it's practiced, and I'm kind of like, I like the I like the analogy of shepherd, because they really are sheep. Ba is
Do you
definitely
refer them to themselves as sheep, and to say,
yeah.
around saying you are to be a sheep? I got called a goat once by Jehovah's Witness. They said there's sheep and then there's goats. I get the feeling that you are a goat, and goats are stubborn and they think they know best.
And they do whatever the fuck they like.
I said that was a terrible insult. You refer to yourself as a sheep. You're insulting yourself and bigging me up. Thank you. Do you really have to go, or can you stay for another cup of tea? They had to go. They never did return.
You can't fence goats. They'll climb out. They climb up trees, which I just find fascinating.
Yeah.
I can see why they would say the devil was a goat.
I think I was born in the year of the goat, actually. Chinese calendar. I'm sure I was born in the year of the goat.
Possibly.
Anyway, that's got nothing to do with anything.
Michelle says Christianity also teaches a regular person recognizing their sovereignty as the same as the sin of Lucifer.
Yes, they do. Yeah. Pride and such.
Fascinating.
The whole microcosm thing.
But then what I like so much about that is Lucifer meaning light bringer. That actually, even in their own religion, potentially, you could argue that the blueprint is there, that actually you should all be becoming Lucifer.
Well, that's what a lot of Christian occultists would say, and the Rosicrucians and Gnostic Christians and that sort of thing. They will say that Christianity and such has been co-opted, and that actually it's a path for ascension. Following Jesus is to become Jesus, to be able to do all the things that Jesus is and does and such. So I get that, and I'd agree with that from an occult perspective. But yeah, I mean, a lot of, from what I see with a lot of religions, it's slavery. It's that what they're trying to make slaves.
Oh, I've got another one where I'm going to add the word really again. Chris raised a really good point about priesthood. Christian witchcraft sounds no more dichotomous than Roman And old Miss Veronica loves Lucy, obviously.
Oh.
I think Lucifer's one of the sexiest angels out there. Not going to go back to the Bellamy, but you know, I do like me a bit of Lucifer. Not so keen on the devil. You can keep that.
I don't like the goat thing, right? And the depictions of Lucifer are normally kind of emo rock nowadays, aren't they? Mick Jagger look, which I don't really like all that much. There was that sculpture. There was someone that made a sculpture. Someone at the Moot was saying that someone was commissioned to do a sculpture of Lucifer by, I presume it was the church or a church or something like that, and they made it so sexy that the person got fired, and that they hired, it was either a brother or family member or friend, something like that, of the sculptor, who made another carving that was even more sexier than the other one. I don't know what the artist was.
One of my favourite depictions of him is in that kind of beautiful mode, but with horns, and that always reminds me of all the depictions of Alexander the Great. Like, I feel like some of the kind of depictions you get during the Renaissance are kind of looking back at that Romanesque version, and so seeing those kind of horns through this kind of tousled hair reminds me a lot of Alexander the Great.
It does,
so I just think
Alexander the Great from a physical perspective. You don't do it for me. It's more your cup of tea. Here we go.
Is that because he's a brunette?
No, it's not all about blondes. I just don't like it when hair's too short. I don't like it when hair's too long. I'm fucking fussy. Lucifer was too hot for the church. So there we go. It's a little article that I literally just Googled, but there's two different articles. 1842 it was, for St. Paul's Cathedral in Belgium.
Okay.
They did one sculpture, the Angel of Evil, and it was too sexy, so then they got someone else to do another one, which I think was called the Genius of Evil, and then that was even worse. So yeah. Right. I think that is about it. I don't think there's any other questions.
No, there's a few more comments though. So Alumnia says fear keeps the wheel turning.
Yes, it does.
Lady Veronica says he didn't fall. I pushed him to his limit and he jumped. Which sounds very much like Lady Veronica. And then,
is she Lady Veronica now, is she?
I don't know who this is, but I love the devil when he's a goat at the top and a man at the bottom.
Right. Someone that's very
which I think is just practical. You know, I just think he's practical. Like, do you know all those kind of those questions about mermaids? About would you want them the other way round to make them more useful?
I wouldn't want a mermaid
with
any which way. I'm sorry, but no. It's a big
you wouldn't want a mermaid either way.
Right. That's it. I will get to work on those Bellamy concept scenes for the Oracle deck. And
that's why he's rushing off. Look at him.
I will send them to Mr. Chris, because we won't be able to post them on the Witchcraft Live Facebook group. I know I've tried posting things before and the algorithm does not like it, and I don't want to be banned again. So that's it. Over and out, I suppose. And if my mouse works, I'll push a little button that will play us out, maybe.